Before the assassination attempt on May 13, 1981, Pope John Paul II was already a prominent figure on the world stage, known not only as the spiritual leader of the Catholic Church but also as an influential political and social actor. Elected in 1978, Karol Wojtyla was the first Polish pope in history and the first non-Italian pope in more than 400 years, events that alone marked a significant turning point in the history of the papacy. Coming from Poland, a country at the time heavily influenced by Soviet communism, John Paul II brought with him a deep commitment to human rights and a fierce opposition to oppressive regimes. His election occurred during a period of high political tension during the Cold War, and his pontificate was seen by many as a symbol of hope for religious and personal freedoms in the countries of the Soviet bloc. John Paul II distinguished himself with his active and traveling approach, visiting 129 countries during his pontificate and drawing large crowds wherever he went. His visits were not just ceremonial but often had significant political implications. For example, his visit to Poland in 1979 was a key moment that many believe inspired the formation and success of the Solidarity movement, which played a crucial role in overcoming communism in Poland. Beyond political aspects, the pontificate of John Paul II was also notable for his theological teachings, particularly the theology of the body. These speeches, held in the early years of his pontificate, offered a deeply integrated vision of human sexuality, marriage, and family, based on the intrinsic dignity of the human person and Christian love. John Paul II was also a pioneer in promoting interreligious dialogue, seeking to build bridges with other faiths, particularly Islam and Judaism. His prayer at the Western Wall in Jerusalem and his historic meeting with the Imam of the Damascus Mosque were symbolic gestures of reconciliation between Christians and Jews, and between Christians and Muslims. In the context of these vast and dynamic efforts, the 1981 assassination attempt was not only a physical attack on the Pope himself, but also an attack on the principles he represented: peace, freedom, and dialogue. His ability to face and overcome this personal ordeal added an additional level of respect and admiration from believers and non-believers around the world. Mehmet Ali Agca, the young man who attempted to assassinate Pope John Paul II, is a complex and controversial figure, whose actions and motivations have been the subject of widespread speculation and conspiracy theories. Born on January 9, 1958, in Hakimin, Turkey, Agca came from a modest background and first became known to authorities as a member of the Grey Wolves, a Turkish ultranationalist group. The Grey Wolves were and are a far-right organization connected to the Nationalist Movement Party, MHP, in Turkey, known for their radical Turkish nationalism, anti-communism, and Islamism. During the 1970s and 80s, the group was involved in numerous acts of political violence, including murders and bombings. Agca joined the Grey Wolves at a young age and participated in their militant activities. Before the assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II, Agca was already known to law enforcement. On February 1, 1979, he killed Abdi İpekçi, a famous Turkish journalist and chief editor of the newspaper, Milliyet, for reasons that appeared related to his liberal stance and Armenian origins. Agca was arrested and sentenced for this crime, but managed to escape from the high-security military prison of Maltepe in November 1979, under mysterious circumstances that suggested the possibility of external accomplices or some internal complicity. After his escape, Agca traveled to various parts of Europe, including Yugoslavia and Bulgaria. During this period, he is believed to have had contacts with various intelligence figures and organizations, although the details of these meetings remain obscure and subject to speculation. His arrival in Rome and the decision to assassinate the Pope were described by him as guided by some sort of divine mission, although the credibility of these claims has been questioned by many. Following the assassination attempt on May 13, 1981, Agca was quickly captured by Italian police thanks to the intervention of some civilians and Swiss guards. Initially, he gave contradictory and confused versions of his motives, sometimes citing his desire to end communism, other times proclaiming his role as the second coming of Christ or as Christ's general. His statements during interrogations were often contradictory, and his erratic behavior during the trial suggested a possible psychological instability. Conspiracy theories about the involvement of other governments, particularly the Bulgarian government and, by extension, the Soviet Union, emerged almost immediately. These theories suggested that the assassination attempt was orchestrated to stop the Pope's anti-communist influence, especially in Poland. However, despite various investigations and trials, concrete evidence of these links remains elusive, leaving the story of Mehmet Ali Agca shrouded in mystery and controversy. May 13, 1981, is a date that deeply marked the history of the Catholic Church and the entire world. On that day, Pope John Paul II was the victim of an assassination attempt that could have changed the course of recent history. This chapter examines in detail the events of that day, from the preparations for the assassination to its immediate aftermath. On the morning of May 13th, St. Peter's Square was filled with the faithful and tourists gathered to attend the general audience of the Pope. The square, the beating heart of the Vatican, was a place of celebration and spirituality, unaware of the tragedy that was about to unfold. Mehmet Ali Agca, the future assailant, had blended in with the crowd, waiting for the Pope's arrival. Pope John Paul II arrived shortly after, aboard his open-top Popemobile, a vehicle designed to allow the pontiff to be visible to his followers as he moved among them. The Pope was known for his desire to be close to the faithful, and the Popemobile was a symbol of such openness. As the vehicle slowly made its way through the crowd, the Pope greeted those present, blessing them and smiling. At approximately 5:17 p.m., as the Popemobile passed near Agca, he drew a 9mm Browning pistol and fired 4 shots. 2 of the bullets struck John Paul II, one in the abdomen and one in the hand. Silence fell over St. Peter's Square, followed by screams and confusion as the crowd realized what had just happened. The immediate reaction was one of shock and disbelief. The response from security was swift. The Swiss Guard and Italian police immediately intervened to assist the Pope and neutralize the assailant. Agca was grabbed and restrained by some of the faithful and by the police before he could cause further harm. He was arrested on the spot and taken away for interrogation. Immediately after being shot, Pope John Paul II was promptly assisted. Despite his severe injuries and the intense pain, he remained conscious during the initial first aid. He was quickly transported to Gemelli Hospital in Rome, where doctors began an emergency surgical operation to save his life. The seriousness of his condition aroused widespread concern, and many people around the world began to pray for his recovery. The assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II had an immediate and profound impact not only on the Catholic Church but on the entire international community. Governments, world leaders, and followers of different faiths expressed their shock and solidarity with the Pope. The event intensified the debate on security issues and the vulnerability of world leaders. The reaction to the assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II was swift and filled with deep emotion that united people of different nationalities and faiths in a common concern for the pontiff's well-being. This chapter examines the immediate reactions at the local and global levels, highlighting the profound emotional and social impact of the event. Immediately after being shot, the Pope was promptly attended to. Despite being severely injured, with 2 bullets hitting him in the abdomen and hand, John Paul II remained conscious and was able to speak with those assisting him. The Popemobile was quickly transformed into an improvised ambulance, and the Pope was transported to Gemelli Hospital in Rome. During the journey, he remained remarkably calm, praying and encouraging his attendants to do the same. The Pontifical Swiss Guard and the Vatican Gendarmerie, already on high alert during public events, were immediately scrutinized to understand how the assailant had managed to bypass the security measures. Although security was stringent, the Pope's openness to the faithful had created inevitable vulnerabilities. After the assassination attempt, the Pope's security was significantly enhanced, with a complete review of protocols and an increase in precautions. News of the assassination spread rapidly around the world through the media. Television, radio, and newspapers interrupted their regular broadcasts to provide updates on the Pope's health status. The gravity of the event captured international attention, and world leaders, including prominent figures such as the President of the United States and the Secretary General of the United Nations, expressed their horror and solidarity. The reaction from the faithful was one of the most touching. Throughout the world, Catholics and non-Catholics alike united in prayer for the Pope's health. Prayer vigils were organized in churches, cathedrals, and private homes. This global prayer movement not only demonstrated the deep affection and respect for John Paul II but also highlighted his role as a significant moral and spiritual figure internationally. Despite the gravity of his injuries, John Paul II displayed extraordinary calm and presence of mind. According to reports from assistants and doctors who treated him, the Pope relied on his faith to endure the pain and anxiety of the assassination attempt and subsequent surgery. This response not only strengthened his image as a man of deep spirituality but also served as an inspiration to many who followed the events. The immediate reaction to the assassination reflected a range of broader themes, including the vulnerability of world leaders, the importance of security, and the unifying power of faith in the face of crisis. The event also strengthened the bond between John Paul II and the faithful, further cementing his status as one of the most beloved and respected popes of the 20th century. The surgical intervention that Pope John Paul II underwent at Gemelli Hospital in Rome was an emergency procedure that proved crucial not only for his survival but also for the continuation of his pontificate. This chapter details the delicate operation and the recovery period that followed, highlighting the Pope's resilience and deep spirituality. Upon arriving at the hospital in critical condition, the Pope was immediately taken into care by a team of eminent Italian surgeons specializing in trauma and abdominal surgery. The doctors faced numerous challenges, as the bullets had caused severe damage to multiple organs, including the intestine and colon. The operation lasted about 5 hours, during which the surgeons worked intensely to remove bullet fragments and repair the extensive internal damage. The success of the procedure was met with a sigh of relief from all those anxiously following the Pope's fate. Despite the successful surgery, the post-operative period was complicated and filled with challenges. John Paul II faced several complications, including infections and issues related to prolonged immobility. His age and the severity of the wounds required careful monitoring and an intensive care regimen that included antibiotics, blood transfusions, and pain management therapies. During his convalescence, the Pope received an enormous amount of support from the faithful worldwide. Messages of well-wishes and prayers arrived daily at the hospital, reflecting the deep bond that John Paul II had established not only with Catholics but also broadly. His indomitable spirit and deep faith also played a crucial role in his challenging path to recovery. The Pope himself attributed his survival to the intercession of the Virgin Mary of Fatima, to whom he was particularly devoted, and whose anniversary of the first appearance coincided with the day of the assassination. The recovery process was long and gradual. John Paul II spent several weeks in the hospital before he could be discharged. Even after returning to the Vatican, his schedule was significantly reduced to allow him to regain his strength. This forced period of convalescence was also a time of reflection for the Pope, who meditated deeply on the meaning of his survival and how this event would influence his future ministry. John Paul II's return to public life was marked by a warm and festive reception. His first public appearance post-recovery, during the Angelus prayer from the window of his study overlooking St. Peter's Square, was a moment of great emotion and joy for the faithful, who saw in this return not only a personal victory over death but also a symbol of hope and resilience. The entire experience of the assassination, the surgical intervention, and the recovery reinforced the figure of John Paul II as a leader of extraordinary physical and spiritual strength, whose ability to face and overcome extreme trials left an indelible imprint in the memory of the faithful and the history of the Church. After the assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II, an in-depth investigation was initiated to determine not only the immediate circumstances of the event but also the possible motivations and political backgrounds that could have guided the attacker. Mehmet Ali Agca. This chapter examines the course of the investigations, the trial, and its political and legal implications. Italian authorities, in collaboration with the Vatican and other international agencies, immediately began to try to understand how Agca, already known to the police for his ties to the extremist group the Grey Wolves and for a previous murder in Turkey, had managed to plan and execute such a bold attack in broad daylight and in one of the most guarded places in the world. The investigation quickly focused on Agca's movements before the assassination, including his travels across Europe and his possible contacts with intelligence groups or terrorist organizations. Agca was arrested immediately after the attack thanks to the rapid intervention of those present and the security forces. During the interrogations, he provided several versions of the events, some of which were contradictory and confused. Initially, he claimed to have acted alone, but later suggested he had accomplices and mentioned connections to the Soviet bloc and Bulgarian secret services. These statements led to a series of conspiracy theories that further complicated the investigation. The trial against Mehmet Ali Agca opened in Rome in July 1981. Agca was tried for attempted murder and a series of other crimes related to the assassination. During the trial, he maintained erratic behavior, frequently changing his story and sometimes claiming to be the Messiah. Despite his bizarre statements, the court proceeded based on the evidence collected. In July 1981, Agca was sentenced to life imprisonment. Agca's initial statements about possible links to Bulgarian secret services and the influence of the USSR led to a broader investigation known as the Bulgarian connection hypothesis. This theory suggested that the assassination was organized to prevent John Paul II from further influencing political dissent in the Soviet bloc countries. However, despite intense investigation and a separate trial involving alleged Bulgarian accomplices, concrete evidence was insufficient to establish a definitive connection. And the suspects were ultimately acquitted. The trial and investigations into the assassination of Pope John Paul II had significant political and legal implications. Internationally, the event fueled tensions between the NATO bloc and the Warsaw Pact countries, in a period already laden with diplomatic challenges. Legally, the case highlighted the need for greater international cooperation in combating terrorism and investigating crimes that had transnational ramifications. The assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II immediately raised suspicions and speculation about possible international conspiracies. Mehmet Ali Agca's initial confessions, in which he hinted at connections with foreign intelligence services, and the context of the Cold War brought forth the Bulgarian conspiracy theory, suggesting direct involvement by communist governments in the assassination. This chapter explores the origins, investigations, and implications of this conspiracy theory, analyzing how it influenced public perception of the event and international relations. The Bulgarian conspiracy theory first emerged when Agca, during interrogations, insinuated that the Bulgarian embassy in Rome had recruited and supported him in planning the assassination. According to Agca, the motive was related to the Soviet Union's desire to eliminate a pope who was seen as a threat to communist stability in Poland and Eastern Europe. Poland was particularly significant in this context, given John Paul II's role in supporting the Solidarity movement and promoting anti-communist dissent. Agca's statements led to a thorough investigation, conducted by Italian authorities with the collaboration of Western intelligence agencies. Travel, meetings, and suspicious financial transactions that seemed to link Agca with individuals inside the Bulgarian embassy were analyzed. The KGB was also suggested as a possible behind-the-scenes orchestrator, though concrete evidence was elusive. The investigation expanded to include Bulgaria's role and possible connections with other Eastern Bloc states. A separate trial was initiated to investigate the role of Bulgarian citizens allegedly involved. Sergio Sergeyev Posad, an officer of the Bulgarian embassy, was among those accused of being Agca's contact. However, the trial was hampered by inconsistent testimonies and a lack of direct evidence, leading ultimately to the acquittal of the defendants. The accusations of an international conspiracy thus remained without a clear resolution, fueling further theories and speculation. The Bulgarian conspiracy theory had a significant impact on international relations, particularly between the NATO bloc and the Warsaw Pact countries. The assassination attempt and subsequent investigations contributed to a climate of distrust and tension, complicating diplomatic efforts and security negotiations. These tensions manifested in various ways, from public statements to political decisions, influencing the dynamics of the Cold War in the following years. Although the Bulgarian conspiracy theory was never definitively proven, it remains a significant example of how dramatic events can be intertwined with global politics, giving rise to narratives that can persist for decades. The episode also demonstrates how truth can sometimes be obscured by international power plays, leaving unresolved issues that fuel public and historiographical speculation. After months of physical and mental recovery, Pope John Paul II resumed his papal duties with renewed vigor and dedication. This chapter explores the resumption of his activities, the impact of the assassination on his pontificate, and how this event influenced his approach to ministry and international relations. The first public appearance of John Paul II after the assassination was an emotionally charged moment for both him and the faithful around the world. His discharge from Gemelli Clinic and return to the Vatican were met with great joy and relief. His presence at the Sunday Angelus, a few weeks after leaving the hospital, demonstrated his resilience and unwavering commitment to his ministry. Despite being visibly weaker and occasionally tired, the Pope continued to participate in public events, showing a determination that reinforced his message of peace and hope. Recognizing the seriousness of the risk experienced and the security implications that resulted, significant changes were made in how the Vatican organized public events and managed the Pope's security. The Pope-mobile, for instance, was modified to include bulletproof glass. Additionally, the Pope and his advisors adjusted his schedule to allow for longer rest periods and to reduce physical stress without compromising his global presence and impact. The experience of the assassination had a profound impact on John Paul II's theological and moral priorities. His emphasis on mercy, forgiveness, and reconciliation became even more central to his teachings. The Pope leveraged his personal experience of suffering and forgiveness to deepen dialogue with other religions and to promote global peace. His commitment to human rights, in particular, received new momentum, leading him to speak more openly against oppressive regimes and to support liberation movements, as he had previously done in Poland. Despite the assassination, John Paul II did not reduce the number of his international pastoral visits, which he continued to see as an essential component of his ministry. These visits were opportunities not only to strengthen faith among Catholics but also to promote messages of peace and unity in often divided or conflict-ridden contexts. His travels to countries such as Nicaragua, Chile, and the United Kingdom, among others, during periods of internal political tension or tense international relations, testified to his commitment to justice and reconciliation. John Paul II's return to his activities was a period of rebirth and renewal not only for him personally but also for the Catholic Church as a whole. Demonstrating extraordinary willpower and faith in his mission, the Pope transformed his personal ordeal into a source of spiritual inspiration and moral leadership, emphasizing the power of forgiveness and the need for dialogue in a fragmented world. One of the most remarkable aspects of Pope John Paul II's response to the assassination attempt was his extraordinary act of forgiveness towards his attacker, Mehmet Ali Agca. This chapter explores the Pope's act of forgiveness, its impact on the Church, society, and the concept of Christian reconciliation. On December 27, 1983, less than 3 years after the assassination attempt, Pope John Paul II visited Mehmet Ali Agca in his cell at Rebibbia prison in Rome. The visit was largely kept private, but it was reported that the Pope and Agca conversed for about 20 minutes. During this meeting, John Paul II declared that he had forgiven his attacker, an act that echoed the teachings of Jesus Christ about love and forgiveness even towards enemies. The forgiveness offered by John Paul II was not just a personal act of mercy, but also a powerful theological and pastoral statement. With this act, the Pope concretely demonstrated one of the fundamental principles of Christianity, the command to forgive. This action was consistent with his continual emphasis on the importance of reconciliation and dialogue as means to build peace and heal divisions. The decision to forgive Agca had a broad impact on media and public opinion. In a world still divided by the Cold War and frequent violent conflicts, the Pope's example offered an alternative vision to the cycle of violence and vengeance. John Paul II's gesture was widely discussed in both religious and secular circles, becoming a reference point in debates on themes such as justice, forgiveness, and reconciliation. While many praised the Pope for his act of forgiveness, others criticized it, arguing that it could downplay the seriousness of the crime committed and potentially discourage rigorous justice for acts of severe violence. However, John Paul II clarified that his forgiveness did not imply a legal absolution of Agca, but rather a personal offering of reconciliation, in line with Christian principles of mercy. This act of forgiveness can be seen as a culmination of John Paul II's theological vision, which emphasized human dignity and the potential for redemption for all, regardless of past actions. His choice to forgive Agca reflected his deep belief that forgiveness is a transformative force, capable of paving the way for the healing of the deepest wounds and the building of a more peaceful and just society. The assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II and his response to this traumatic event have left an indelible mark on his pontificate and the world. This chapter examines how the assassination and the subsequent actions of the Pope, particularly his gesture of forgiveness, have helped define his legacy and influenced the Catholic Church and global society. The assassination strengthened John Paul II's image as a leader of extraordinary moral and physical strength. His ability to face such an ordeal with courage and faith increased respect and admiration for him among believers and non-believers alike. This event also highlighted his deep commitment to the Christian principles of forgiveness and mercy, elements that became central in his message and ministry. The forgiveness extended to Mehmet Ali Agca, a Muslim, had a strong impact on interreligious dialogue. John Paul II had already shown a strong interest in improving relations between Christians and other religions, but his act of forgiveness resonated deeply worldwide, promoting a message of peace and understanding across different faiths. This act facilitated further openings and discussions between the Catholic Church and Muslim communities, as well as strengthening ecumenical initiatives. John Paul II's personal experience of suffering and his response to it opened new avenues of theological reflection on the nature of suffering, human resilience, and the role of faith in overcoming moments of great difficulty. These themes became focal points in his subsequent teachings, influencing theological and philosophical discussions within the Church and the broader academic community. The assassination and the subsequent forgiveness strengthened John Paul II's role as a global ambassador of peace. Through his personal example, the Pope embodied the possibility of reconciliation and the building of bridges between divided peoples and nations. His commitment to peace left a lasting mark on the Church's efforts to address international conflicts and promote social justice. Finally, the legacy of the assassination attempt on John Paul II and his response has transcended the immediate context, offering a source of hope and inspiration for people of all faiths and nationalities. The story of his forgiveness, in particular, continues to be a powerful reminder of the transformative power of mercy and faith, and is frequently cited in discussions on how to confront adversity and evil in the world.